Terrorism needs money to be effective. That money is coming from drugs. Heroin trafficking is funding 37% of all the world's terrorist organizations. So a heroin user in the United States, when he's putting heroin into his arm, may not understand that the money he used to buy that heroin is supporting terrorism, targeting Americans here in this country and around the world.
75 to 85% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. And if you can get to the country that is the root of the problem and focus our attention on those people that can cause us harm, we have a lot more impact.
And in this particular case, we're up against the biggest drug trafficker in the world.
As a former FBI agent and chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I had oversight of all 16 of our nation's intelligence agencies. My name is Mike Rogers. I had access to classified information gathered by our operatives, people who risked everything for the United States and our families. You don't know their faces or their names. You don't know the real stories from the people who lived the fear and the pressure until now.
On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. The leadership of al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime.
Missile explosions light up the nighttime skies. Anti-aircraft tracers streak over the capital city, Kabul.
We went to Afghanistan because we were attacked in New York and 3,000 Americans died. The Taliban were sheltering bin Laden.
The only way to deal with these terrorist threats is to go at them where they exist.
The targets? The Taliban military, air defense systems, command and control bunkers, airfields and warplanes around Kabul, Jalalabad, and Kandahar.
We went into Afghanistan as a way of self-defense, as a way of targeting terrorism. The U.S. pushed the Taliban out rather quickly. The leadership of the Afghan Taliban mostly fled into Pakistan, in the area just over the border from Afghanistan.
In less than 2 months, the Taliban army had been destroyed and the Taliban government replaced with transitional leaders eager to work with the West.
At the time, the basic policy was not to let the Taliban come back. So there was a massive international effort to try to rebuild Afghanistan, which had been a very poor, underdeveloped country before it had 20-odd years of war.
The Afghan people. It had been through the Soviet invasion, the Civil War, and then the time of the Taliban. And it's as if their soul had been ripped out.
It's almost inconceivable to Americans how shattered this country was.
People say, oh, it's medieval there. And the common phrase was, it's not medieval, think Flintstones. It was very primitive.
So the economy was destroyed and poppies increased in volume. They'd always been a crop there going back to when my father was ambassador in the 60s. It was an issue, but it became an increasingly necessary way for farmers to feed their family.
We are the poorest people in this area. If we don't cultivate poppies, we can't feed ourselves and our family.
Afghanistan had 70% of the land dedicated to poppy production in the world. It also produced over 90% of the world's heroin. So most of the heroin in the world was coming out of Afghanistan. It was also supporting the Taliban.
After the war in 2001, the Taliban wanted to return to power and recreate the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.
They wanted to institute Sharia law again, which is fundamental Islam, and kick the Americans out.
The Taliban would infiltrate the local communities and they would threaten everybody and say, it's our way or we're gonna kill your family.
There's also a symbiotic relationship between the Taliban and the drug traffickers. The Taliban is making it more difficult for police to target the traffickers. In return, the drug traffickers are financially supporting the Taliban and logistically supporting the Taliban.
Narcotics dollars were being used to purchase weapons and ammunition to fight the U.S. and coalition.
They were conducting their attacks against civilians. They were going after Afghan government people, Westerners, and specifically Americans and American military personnel.
By 2005, the Taliban was increasing the insurgency in Afghanistan, and I was reporting that it was going to get bigger, it was going to get more violent, that it was going to be very bloody, it was going to get worse.
The DEA doesn't have a wartime mission. However, when we started to see the link between the heroin traffickers around the world and the U.S. troops that were being killed by terrorists, we thought it was our duty to take the people out that were responsible for moving all the heroin and then moving money back to the terrorist organizations. It was kind of groundbreaking, certainly in a new part of the world, and it was at a level of danger that we had not seen since we had taken out so many cartel heads in Colombia.
So we started the office in Afghanistan, and I joined the first FAST teams in 2005, which is a DEA's international tactical team.
They are trained in paramilitary operations. They'll train with special forces, special operations.
The DEA's goals were to train the Afghan police. We were learning what was going on, not just in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan and in the region. We recognize that the eastern part of the country, in the Nangarhar province specifically, is the biggest obstacle to bringing the rule of law to Afghanistan. The Nangarhar province is where Osama bin Laden fled out of Afghanistan.
It's like the Wild West, a very unsafe place. This is an area with a tradition of growing a lot of poppy. There's mountainous clandestine labs there, so a lot of the heroin is produced in these areas. There's definitely a handful of large players, but Haji Bagcho would be one of the largest heroin dealers in Afghanistan.
Our sources were telling us that he was dealing in opium and heroin back into the early 1990s.
Haji Bagcho's organization is extensive.
He had hundreds of people working for him.
He had individuals that were growing poppy, converting it into the opium. There were laboratories where it was processed by chemists. He had individuals that were in charge of transporting product out to various countries. He was a criminal mastermind.
He had offices in Pakistan, he had offices in Afghanistan, and he had distribution networks in 22 countries around the world.
It became clear that Haji Bagcho was kind of the godfather. He was really the man in the shadows that was in charge. The other people that were more well-known, they kind of worked for him.
The money that he was making, the profits, were going into houses, they were going into vehicles. A significant portion of it was going to support terrorism. It was going to the Haqqani network, it was going to the Pakistan Taliban, and to the Afghan Taliban. There's untold numbers of people who died because of that heroin. And the money that was being generated from those heroin sales was going to people that wanted to destroy the United States. So in 2005, we decided to target Haji Bagcho. Our goal was to get evidence that would allow us to prosecute him in the United States.
Every penny you can take away from an insurgency that's targeting our people, you're gonna do it. DEA has always prided itself in going after the biggest, baddest targets in the world.
We're gonna come after you. We're gonna pursue you as long as we can to find justice.
In 2005, DEA decided to target Haji Bagcho.
He was shipping heroin to 22 countries, including the United States.
And the proceeds from selling the heroin around the world were being funneled back to the Taliban and the terrorist organizations, some of which were killing our troops in Afghanistan.
He was having the drug traffickers pay the Taliban as a form of jihad. And he repeatedly said that selling heroin to America was a way to kill infidels.
This case was the first time we'd ever done anything like this, going after someone that was quite this powerful on an international scale. Our purpose was not a military strike and take him out. Our purpose was to gain the evidence needed to prosecute him in the U.S. courts.
So there are two laws that we could use. The 959 law is for anyone distributing drugs destined for the United States. The 960 law is a narco-terrorism law, which means people who are conducting high-level drug trafficking and supporting people engaged in terrorist activities or terrorist organizations.
In this case, it was both. Haji Bagcho, his intent was to get drugs into the United States as a form of jihad, to get American citizens addicted to heroin, and was also supporting terrorist activities in Afghanistan. So at the beginning of the investigation, we just started talking to everybody we could talk to gather intel on Haji Bagcho.
DEA's bread and butter is human intelligence. That's how we do narcotics cases domestically, and it's how we do them overseas. That is what DEA brings to the war on terror.
But Taliban was regaining a foothold in the more rural communities. It made it more difficult for us to move around and operate. We had to be much more careful. We had to conceal our identities.
So every day, my partner and myself would put on Afghan clothing. We'd cover up our weapons. I wore a fake beard, a big, bushy black beard, and a coal on my head. We rented a local car, and we'd drive out of the base into the countryside, and we would meet with informants to develop information. It's extremely dangerous. It's the Wild West.
Also, it's very dangerous to be a source. They were putting their life on the line every day.
We lost many people who were giving us information. If the Taliban found out people were working with the government, they would kidnap them, they would torture them, they would behead them. One of the Taliban commanders that Bagcho was working with carried a sword around with him, and he would cut the hands off of anyone that was cooperating with the government.
But the sources, they wanted the best for their country, so they helped us in securing their nation. But of course, we had to pay them well to get the information we needed.
Throughout the investigation, we learned that Bagcho was very well known in the area. Being a huge drug trafficker, he had somewhat of a celebrity status. He had wealth, power, and the means to buy off government officials.
Haji Bagcho was working with all of the significant police officers in eastern Afghanistan. He was bribing officials, he was also threatening officials. Haji Bagcho was smart, he was also ruthless. In 2006, we developed this one source. He went by the name Fareed. That was a pseudonym that he was using. Fareed was an Afghan national whose family was involved in the opium business in the past and could talk directly to Haji Bagcho about narcotics trafficking. So we had Fareed make a series of recorded telephone calls. And in those calls, Haji Bagcho agreed to sell him 2 kilos of heroin as a sample for a much larger purchase to the United States. Haji Bagcho told Fareed to give the money to a hawaladar. A hawaladar is someone who deals with the informal process of hawala.
Hawala is an ancient form of banking, and which is built on trust. And a hawaladar is a person that conducts the operations, kind of like a bank and a banker. In the hawala system, you can go deposit money in one city, and the money can be picked up by someone else around the world if there's a hawala where they need to be. It was a system that's not being tracked by other governments, by the United States, or by police entities around the world. It's like a human ATM system.
So Fareed knew which hawaladar that Bagcho worked with in Jalalabad. It was a man by the name of Zair Shah. So we sent him to go deliver the money to Haji Bagcho's money man. Fareed gave Zair Shah $5,000 US for the heroin. Zair logged them into his ledgers, and then Fareed left. And a short time later, Haji Bagcho called Fareed and told him that he'd received the money and come to his residence and pick up the 2 kilos of heroin.
Conducting operation against Bagcho's network was very complex, very dangerous. Moving throughout the area was hazardous. The Taliban was ever present.
But the DEA didn't operate independently. They always operated with Afghan forces. It was part of an overall U.S. government counter-narcotics plan. So they were training the Afghans on how to do investigations of drugs, how to conduct raids.
So we set up an operation to pick up the 2 kilos of heroin. We had some guys to conduct surveillance, and then we had a quick reaction force where we had trucks with mounted machine guns, so if the source got into trouble, we could go in and rescue him. We dropped off Fareed, and Fareed walked to Haji Bagcho's compound. big towering walls. These are brick and clay exterior with large gates. Banged on the gate and was met by a young man who retrieved 2 kilos of heroin, delivered them to Fareed, and Fareed walked away. So we had a 2-kilo deal, but the investigation wasn't over. If we arrested him too prematurely, we were afraid he'd be released by corrupt officials.
Also, we had to make sure that we had enough evidence to build the case to prosecute Haji Bagcho in the United States.
So the next step was to prove that Bagcho actually lived at the residence. So shortly after Fareed received the kilos, we decided to execute a search warrant. We flew into the area, and as we were landing near in the proximity to Bagcho's house, I was on the headset in the helicopter, and I heard one of the pilots call out that somebody was running from the back door.
Haji Bagcho was on the run.
Shortly after Fareed received the kilos, we decided to execute a search warrant at Haji Bagcho's residence in October of 2006. So we flew into the area, and as we were landing, I was on the headset in the helicopter, and I heard one of the pilots call out that somebody was running from the back door of Bagcho's residence, and we now know that was actually Bagcho. And we didn't have ground forces to cordon the area, so he was able to escape. But in this case, we actually didn't mind that he escaped because we didn't have the case ready for prosecution in the United States yet. We were still collecting evidence. So we landed, we entered the house, we detained about a dozen people. There were no drugs in the residence, but we obtained some good paperwork. We were able to link Haji Bagcho to that residence. I did go out to the back door, and I saw 2 shoes right outside the back gate where Bagcho had literally run out of his shoes as he was escaping.
After raiding his compound in Nangarhar, he went into the tribal areas in Pakistan. So during that time, our goal was to build the evidence needed to prosecute him in the United States. So we focused some of our efforts on that Hawaladar in the hopes that we would find a paper trail that led back to Haji Bagcho.
We wanted to get evidence to show that the $5,000 US the source had paid for the 2 kilos of heroin had gone to Haji Bagcho. So we conducted a search warrant at the Hawaladar's office in the Sarafi market in downtown Jalalabad. And it's a massive Sarafi market. There's open areas inside the market, but it's several city blocks long and wide.
It reminded me of, as a child, going to the county fair, all the different sounds and smells and people. There were kiosks, carts. It was very busy.
And there's legal and illegal businesses going on.
You could buy a number of things, clothing, office supplies, but you would also have carts that were full of opium-based. Instead of churros, it was discs of opium, lots and lots of opium. It was a place where people would come and they would try to advance their career in the worldwide heroin distribution operations.
And we had Hawaladars that were sending money around the world based in this one little market. And each Hawaladar kept ledgers that recorded these various transactions. So there was lots of business being conducted. And whenever we did these types of operations in Afghanistan, we drew huge crowds. We had to shut off the main streets surrounding the Sarafi market so nobody could escape when we went in. And of course, as soon as we arrived, we're a big target.
A lot of the local people were on the side of the criminal organizations and people like Haji Bagcho that were moving heroin out of Afghanistan because that's what had supported their families for years.
For the farmer, this has nothing to do with a political judgment. This is about feeding your family.
The average income in the country was only a couple $100 a year, annual income.
And we were disrupting their way of life.
So it was a very dangerous situation. We surrounded the market. We had hundreds of people on the streets, massive mobs while we were doing search warrants at 2 stalls. Our goal was to find the ledger to show that the money Fareed had given to Zahir Shah went to Haji Bagcho. These are handwritten ledgers that can be hidden. So we searched the offices of Zahir Shah. We found the ledger, and we were able to gather evidence about Haji Bagcho's transactions
Haji Bagcho in his ledger?
Yes. These are legal documents in Afghanistan for the Hawaladars, so they have to have an accurate representation of who owes what to whom. So people that are in these ledgers under their real names. Now, it doesn't say, receive this money for 2 kilos of heroin, but it does say, receive this money from Fareed on this date, and then gave this money to Haji Bagcho on this date. So we were able to see the money go in, we received the heroin, and then the money went out. So we were able to close the loop.
What we didn't realize is that we were going to be causing a very large controversy in the province of Nangarhar by taking his books. Not only was he working with Haji Bagcho, but he was working with a lot of other people. So as a result of taking his books, basically we shut down the Bank of Jalalabad. It was their version of Wall Street. Maybe the way it would have been run in the 30s or 40s in the United States, but it was still a business. And we were actually contacted by very high-ranking members of the Afghan government saying you have to give the books back so that commerce could continue. So we spent a lot of time copying all the information out of the books, and in a short period of time had to give them back because we were guests of the Afghan government.
At that point, Haji Bagcho was still in Pakistan. So in November 2007, DEA FAST did another search of Haji Bagcho's residence and of his chemist's residence.
As a result of those raids, we found more ledgers, one of which showed Haji Bagcho was making vast amounts of money with his international heroin operations.
In just those 2 ledgers, we can show that Haji Bagcho distributed in that 1-year period, this is from March of 2006 to March of 2007, 231,000 kilos of heroin. To put it in better context, if you take 1 kilo of heroin and distribute it all the way down, so someone's actually taking the heroin and putting it in their arm, 1 kilo of heroin can generate approximately $1.5 million. He sold 231,000 kilos. So the amount of kilos that he had is in the billions of dollars for 1 year. And we know he had more. We had sources who said there were other ledgers that dealt directly with the Taliban. So at a minimum, he distributed approximately 20% of the world's heroin. It's almost too high to comprehend how one organization could supply this much heroin.
The amount of money that we discovered in the ledgers was shocking. He was stinking rich. And he was funneling his money to terrorist operations in Afghanistan. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda.
Is it safe to estimate that over the years he gave hundreds of millions of dollars to terrorist groups like the Taliban?
Yes. We also have witness testimony talking about Haji Bagcho giving large sums to the Taliban.
When we saw the information that came out of the ledger, and we understood the magnitude of the person we were dealing with, it was validation that we were focusing our efforts on the right target. Many times in drug law enforcement, information comes in that makes you believe someone is really a giant target. And when it's all said and done, it may not be as big as you thought. Well, it was just the opposite for Haji Bagcho. He was even bigger than we imagined. We knew we had enough to go forward on prosecuting him. Now we just had to find him and capture him.
When we first started investigating Haji Bagcho, we knew he was one of the biggest drug traffickers in Afghanistan. But we really didn't know how prolific he was. Haji Bagcho was the most prolific drug trafficker in the world. He was responsible for approximately 20% of the world's heroin. He was also working hand in glove with the Taliban. Bagcho was funding and enabling acts of terror.
So between the evidence we gained raiding the Hawaladar, the information and evidence that we got from the sources that we ran into, and the raid on his compound, I felt confident that we had enough to prosecute Haji Bagcho in the United States.
At that point, Bagcho kind of fell off our radar.
He had been on the run for over a year.
He was working out of Pakistan, and he was in an area that the Pakistan government doesn't control.
We were getting intel that he was moving around quite quickly. He knew that we were after him at that point.
But he was still running this multi-billion-dollar drug trafficking organization from Pakistan. So up through 2008, we focused on the top production laboratories in Nangarhar province who were working for Haji Bagcho.
The area where Haji Bagcho's network primarily operated out of was very mountainous. It was the mountains right up against the Pakistan border.
These drug labs are at 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 feet.
Which made it very difficult for us to get to unless you came in by helicopter, which we were forced to do.
You also have the Taliban in these large numbers staying at the drug camps, working with the drug traffickers, and physically protecting them. So these were complicated and dangerous missions. You know, it's a life and death thing. But in the end, we would seize heroin, we would seize representative samples, we'd blow up the labs while we were there. And then we would use our human sources to link that lab to the top producers who actually own the lab and were working for Bagcho. So we continued hitting these laboratories with the goal of collecting evidence for prosecution in the United States.
Yet again, the Taliban have attempted to storm a U.S. military base. Jalalabad Airport, the main base in eastern Afghanistan, came under attack early Wednesday.
In 2008, I was at the Jalalabad airfield. That particular airfield got hit several times while we were there with suicide bombers at the front gate.
You had ongoing car bombs, rocket attacks, kidnappings. There was a plethora of danger.
But we were continuing to run sources, and while I was at the Jalalabad airfield, the Kabul office had some representatives there, and they said they had a source. So my partner and I agreed to go out and pick up the source for them. When we went out and picked them up, we realized that this was a man named Kari. I first met Kari in Haji Bagcho's residence in 2006 when we did a search warrant. Kari was almost a part of Bagcho's family. He often lived in Haji Bagcho's house, he tutored his children, and he was intimately involved in Haji Bagcho's illicit activities. And he agreed to cooperate with the Afghan police against Haji Bagcho.
Why?
Maybe he was worried about his life, the involvement of the Taliban. There could have been a number of motivations for it. So we put a blanket over him and then brought him back onto a base so he could be interviewed by the Kabul office representatives.
DEA, we pride ourselves. We believe we handle sources and operate with sources better than any other agency. They were instrumental in getting the evidence needed against Haji Bagcho.
Kari was providing information that he was present when Haji Bagcho gave large sums of money to the Taliban. In one particular meeting, Kari's with Maulawi Kabir, who was the former governor of Nangarhar under the Taliban. They had a meeting in Pakistan. During that meeting, Haji Bagcho gave a large sum of money to the Taliban commander for the purpose of targeting Americans.
We thought it would be important to try to get evidence from the horse's mouth and hear from Bagcho.
You can never have too much evidence. So Kari helped with the second undercover deal we did for 4 kilos of heroin. He helped introduce an undercover police officer into the organization. And the undercover police officer made some recordings and some direct conversations with Haji Bagcho. They set up the deal, and the Afghan police were able to cover it and able to take some video of the deal taking place. And they did a controlled purchase of 4 kilograms of heroin as a sample for drugs that were supposed to come to the United States. Shortly after that, the undercover officer was speaking to Bagcho, and it became evident that Haji Bagcho learned that Kari was an informant for the police. Haji Bagcho called Kari and told him that he would eat his soul. He knew that he was cooperating with the police and was going to kill him. I called Kari and told him to come in because we had to move him out of that province. His life was in too much danger.
So we got him out fast.
The danger levels were at all-time highs. In early 2009, I was in charge of the Jalalabad Enforcement Group. They were conducting ongoing operations against Haji Bagcho, and we had several sources out trying to locate him. And it was in March 2009 that we were contacted by our office in Islamabad, Pakistan, and informed that Pakistan's intelligence service had picked him up on false documents.
And through the Department of State, we reached out to the government of Pakistan to see if they would turn Haji Bagcho over to Afghanistan and the DEA. And Pakistan was willing to turn him over.
We had one shot at getting Bagcho, and they wanted to hand him over at the Torkham gate.
That's the fatal funnel.
It's about the worst case scenario you could imagine.
Probably one of the most dangerous places on the face of the earth.
In May of 2009, we received a great break in the case. We got informed that Pakistan's intelligence service had picked up Bagcho on false documents. Initially, I was excited, but once I started to think about how the operation was going to be conducted, a dark reality came over. This was going to be a lot harder than what I thought it was going to be. The time and the drop-off were determined by Pakistan, and they wanted to hand him over at the Torkham gate. The Torkham gate is a border crossing between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's an area that's very chaotic. 15 to 20,000 people cross over on a daily basis. No security, no one is being checked. Every fiber in my being said, this is not probably the best thing to do, but it was the only way we were gonna get Bagcho. We flew via helicopter from Kabul up to the Torkham area, landed at a forward operating base. From there, we moved up to the gate, and it's a single mountain road that kind of weaves up into the mountains and right up to the crossing. So we would describe it as a fatal funnel.
You have the mountains and the pass, and there's one way in, one way out. So if you're coming in and your enemies are on the other side, all the rounds are going to be coming through that fatal funnel. The area is one of the most dangerous places on the face of the earth.
It's about the worst case scenario you could imagine. We just had to hope that Pakistan was going to follow through with their end of the bargain. Once our unit got up to the handover point, they waited in position, and we described this area as the X.
That is the designated meeting spot, and you want to get off the X quickly because if somebody's set up with a sniper, they're going to plan the attack on the X.
So at that point, we were most vulnerable. We're just sitting ducks up there, and the clock is ticking. Time seems like it drags. And the stakes were really high. It was nerve-wracking. After 60 minutes or so, two individuals walked up with an individual that was under a white sheet. The theory behind that is nobody knows who's under the sheet. That way, no one can come to his aid because he was a well-known individual in the area. But there's so much going on and so much chaos that it really didn't draw a huge amount of attention. The introductions were very brief, but these are units that we had no experience with, so our trust with them was actually fairly low. So things that are going through our mind as we're grabbing him, is this a suicide bomber? Is it gonna be someone that's gonna detonate and kill our agents? Or is this really Bagcho? So we quickly moved him into a vehicle. We took the sheet off, and it was, in fact, Bagcho. After that, we wanted to get off the X. We quickly moved through the area and made it back to the forward operating base, which was a secure zone for us. And I breathed a sigh of relief. But ultimately, I was not going to feel completely satisfied until we had him on an aircraft and he was heading back to the United States. After we got Bagcho, we secured him in an Afghan detention facility. From there, we began putting in the extradition request to the government of Afghanistan.
At the time, Afghanistan didn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. So it was always a little risky for us to capture people in Afghanistan because the final approval for removing someone from Afghanistan was with the president, Hamid Karzai. And although an ally of the United States, it may not have been in the best interest of Afghanistan to release somebody to US officials, especially if it's someone who has a lot of influence over their local area. As any elected official, they have to watch out for the next election. So we were a little worried that we could get Bagcho out of Afghanistan.
So While Haji Bagcho was in the custody of the Afghan police, myself and Phil Kearney went and talked to him. Haji Bagcho seemed incredulous that he could be prosecuted in Afghanistan or even taken to the United States.
He wasn't cooperative. He denied everything. He just claimed to be a farmer. He even said he had never even seen heroin or opium, that he was not part of any heroin trafficking organization, that we had the wrong man and he was guilty of nothing. So I wrapped up the interview. I thanked him for his time, and I told him that I would see him in court in the United States. And he just laughed. He laughed. He thought that was so funny. He told me, I'll never be in the United States.
After several weeks of political negotiations, the government of Afghanistan agreed to extradite Bagcho to the United States.
I was shocked. I had assumed that it would take years, if ever, for him to be released from Afghanistan.
But at the end of the day, they knew that we had a strong case against him, and we provided enough evidence to prove our case. Once we got the call, we picked up Bagcho and we transported him via armored vehicles to an airfield where we had a DEA aircraft on standby. I directly tried to talk to him, tell him that, hey, we're gonna be moving you over to Bagram Air Base. Put your seatbelt on, don't make any moves. Essentially just let him know that we were in control of the situation and he just needed to sit back and enjoy his last flight in Afghanistan.
Did you offer him peanuts?
No. So once we moved him over to the Bagram Air Base, we put him in a temporary holding facility. And after 10 days of babysitting Bagcho around the clock, we finally arranged military transport for him to leave the country. The night that we loaded Bagcho on an aircraft with our agents to head back to the United States, I really breathed a sigh of relief because I finally knew this guy was going to the United States to face justice.
Once he arrived, I made good on my promise. I was waiting for him there at the airbase. He looked up and saw me, and it was at that moment he realized he had just arrived in the U.S. You could see the blood leave his face. And I welcomed him to the USA. I put him in my car, and we took a short trip through D.C. I wanted to make sure that he saw all the U.S. monuments. He realized, even though he was supporting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, what they had tried to inflict upon us, that we were still going. He wasn't going to stop us. I would think that in his mind, it was a horrible time, because everything that he knew before and all the power he thought he had was gone. He was booked into Metro Jail in D.C. with a lot of really bad men that are in the jail there. And I'm sure it was quite the culture shock for him. And I started to exit the scene at that point. I had been to Afghanistan 10 times over 4 years. It had taken its effect on me and many others. And I had put in for a transfer, and I moved to a new DEA office in another country and tried to decompress after all the things that I'd seen and been a part of.
So we went to trial in 2011. We had a 3-week trial.
Haji Bagcho was charged with conspiracy to distribute and distribution of heroin, knowing or intending to import to the U.S., engaging in drug trafficking, and providing funds to terrorist organizations.
To just look at him, you wouldn't know that this little man was responsible for so much death. We brought in 17 witnesses from as far away as Hong Kong. We had 6 or 7 Afghan witnesses who came from Afghanistan at great risk to their own well-being and the well-being of their families, and testified against Haji Bagcho.
Just like he did in the interview we had in Kabul, he continued to deny that he had anything to do with any wrongdoing.
And after a 3-week trial, we had a hung jury. They couldn't come to a verdict. So we had to send the witnesses back, we had to reconstitute the case, and then we retried Haji Bagcho again in the spring of 2012. And the jury came back pretty quickly with a guilty verdict.
He was found guilty of all the charges, and he was sentenced to 3 life sentences in the United States.
I think he was shocked when it actually happened.
He appealed 1, so it's down to 2 life sentences now. The other ones are pretty rock solid.
The successful investigation, extradition, and prosecution of Bagcho really paved the way for future operations against foreign kingpins, and especially as they relate to terrorism, not only in Afghanistan, but throughout the world.
The arrest of Haji Bagcho did not stop other criminal organizations from coming in and filling the void.
But it sent a message that nobody was safe. If we could get Haji Bagcho, we could get anybody. Also, we denied the Taliban hundreds of millions of dollars. And even though we brought Haji Bagcho to the US for prosecution, the Afghan police had arrested him, and the Afghan police gave him to the United States. So it showed that their system of rule of law was actually starting to work.
We hear a lot about these faraway places. Why should we care?
Because in the end, it comes back here. In Osama bin Laden's writings, he talks about drawing the United States into war in Afghanistan. The United States won't be able to handle it, and in the end will be defeated. So if we lose in Afghanistan, what we are saying to the whole Islamic jihadi movement is bin Laden was right, we can't hack it. That would stand as a kind of proof of divine sanction for their side. If you don't think that we're going to pay a heavy price for helping them prove God's on their side, I think you need to take another think.
There were certainly some Afghans that supported the Taliban, but most Afghans wanted the best for their country. And there were many Afghans that put their life on the line to help us. And it'll be for people to come after me in my career to go after the next generation of heroin traffickers. But Haji's not doing it anymore.